So one of the ways in which I think the founders of devolution in Wales were genuinely innovative and radical is that from the very beginning they built the sustainable development principle into the very foundations of this new democratic institution. And that meant that from the very beginning, politicians here and the people who advise them have had to grapple with the way in which the decisions we make today have an impact on the futures that will come beyond us. Now, about halfway through the 20 years we've had a National Assembly for Wales, people began to wonder whether we were interpreting the principle rather narrowly, thinking of it mostly in the environmental field, and whether there were ways we could act to make sure that the same basic approach applied right across the work of the government. And that's how you end up with, in the second decade of devolution, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Now, the Act sets 7 goals, and they cut across everything the Welsh Government does, whether that's creating a more healthy Wales, a more prosperous Wales, an outward-looking Wales, a Wales where our language thrives, whether it's creating a more equal Wales. That has put that sustainable development principle right at the heart of Welsh Government and right across everything we do. And I think that's how you see how the UN goals have made such an impact on the way we've gone about things in Wales. Well, the first thing to say is that public bodies in Wales, and that's not just the Welsh Government, but it's public bodies of all sorts and in all parts of Wales, generally share the ambitions of the Act. They don't need persuading that the decisions we make today must be thought through because of the impact they have on people who come after us tomorrow. Now, of course, we've got to turn that goodwill into practical action, so we need a way of reporting on what bodies do, monitoring what they do, and of course the Commissioner, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act Commissioner that we established here in Wales alongside the Act, has a really important job to do, holding the Welsh Government to account, holding public bodies in Wales to account, and being a critical friend of the work that we are embarked upon here. Because I don't think it's a problem of motivation. People want to do the right thing. We need to make sure we have the mechanisms in place to help people to do that. Well, the priorities are to translate the intentions of the Act into practical impact on the ground, to make sure that the Act has an impact on budgets, for example, the way we spend our money. But the other ambition for the years ahead is to harness behind the Act, not just government and not just public bodies, but that enormous enthusiasm there is in wider Welsh society behind the ambitions that the Act sets down and our wish as a nation to be somewhere where sustainable development principles bite across everything we do. So reaching out beyond the bodies and the formalities of the Act, harnessing the ambitions, the motivation, the determination of wider civil society, that's another agenda for the next decade. Devolution in Wales is very new. It's only been going 20 years, and primary law-making powers have been here for less than a decade. So to have put this Act on the statute book as one of the early and defining pieces of legislation, I think it is something that people will look back on in years to come and say they really were ambitious, they really meant what they said, and this Act will be something that we'll be proud of.